about and found to be encouraging. I hope to share a lot of that with you tonight for a few moments. First of all, Deuteronomy, the word uh, Deuteros, I may be not pronouncing these Greek words correctly, but it means second, and nomos means law. This was the fifth book of Moses, and it included a reinstatement of the Mosaic law. My first perception of Deuteronomy, I knew it was a reinstatement of a law, but that's all I basically really knew. I knew a few things about it, but that was predominantly the view that I had of Deuteronomy, and it's one of the reasons why I really don't look at a lot of Deuteronomy, because of the restatement of a law. But there's much more to this book than that, and I didn't realize that, again, until I looked at the study. Now, it was a reminder, you may remember the first law was being given at Mount Sinai, and God, through Moses, bring this reminder of the law to Israel. They are getting ready to enter the promised land. You may recall the incident that caused them to wander around for 40 years until all that generation that had done evil had been consumed or they died. So this is a new generation that are about to enter into the land of Canaan. And so Moses is restating the law to them, trying to, look, this is the law. I'm restating this before you enter the promised land. And there's a reason, there's importance to that of why Moses, I think, that he's intentionally trying to restate the law to them, not only through God to let them know, but there's something related to Moses that's going to happen that he wants to give the law to them once more. One thing several things I didn't know, but the importance of the book is Deuteronomy is referred over 80 times in the New Testament, and that was new to me. And it was also quoted by Jesus more than any Old Testament book. And I thought that was extremely interesting, that Deuteronomy was quoted by Jesus more than any Old Testament book. So that alone tells me something. You may recall when he was tempted in the wilderness, it was Deuteronomy that he quoted from to Satan. When he was tempted, he quoted from the book of Deuteronomy. Okay, and that was something that was interesting as well. Now, an outline of the book, you can outline it in basically three main section 4, count the last few chapters. The first being the address. This is the address, historical account, chapters 1 through 4, recounting God's goodness in the past. And that was something interesting. I'll talk a little bit about this a little bit. But you're going to notice in this address that Moses is giving, three things are going to happen. First, he's going to recount God's greatness in the past. What is God? Remember what God has done for us in the past. And he tells about that. And I think that's important even today, that we remember what God has done for us. Sometimes we go through life and we forget about all the things that God had done for us to get us where we are today. We think about we forget about how he brought us out of these sins, he brought us out of this, the life that we were living, the people that we associate with, and we forget about that, a lot. One of the reasons why it's good is why we do the communion, is a remembrance, because God knew we're forgettable people. We forget things. And so I think it's good that we as Christians, that we need to think about often about the goodness of God and what he's done in the past. The second, in chapters 5 through 26, was when he was trying to reiterate the law. Okay, he was telling about the law, these things, and the obedience in that. The third address, chapters 27 through 30, is looking forward to restoration of his people and also the blessing of Israel in the future. So it's basically looking to the future uh, of the God's people. Also, the last few verses, chapter 31 through 40, Moses then he get ready to leave the Israelites. Now, the purpose of it, I've already mentioned about the 40 years that we talked about. What I didn't mention, I alluded to, is one thing that's important is Moses is about to die, and he knows it. He's coming. Well, why he's about to die? Well, remember that he had disobeyed God, and God told him that he would not cross over the river Jordan. And now a new generation is now ready to cross over, and they're in preparation of getting crossed over. Moses knows that he was not allowed to cross over. So basically, he knows that he's about to die. So he given a farewell address to the nation. He's trying to, like someone giving their last words of encouragement, so to speak, or their last words, knowing that their time is about to be up. And this has happened with Moses. He knows that he's not allowed to cross over, and so he's giving this address to the people of Israel. And so I thought that was important. Now, in his address, he focused on several things. And I think these things that he focused on that we need to focus on today as Christians as well. First of all, the important one throughout the whole book is to obey the commandment of God. He's telling his people, look, obey God's commandment. Now, the generation prior to them, we know that they did not. Okay, they had sinned, and so they had not obeyed the commandment. So he's telling them, when you go off into this new land, obey God. Second, he tells them to remind them of who their God is. And sometimes we have to be reminded of who God is, because we can easily, sometimes we forget about exactly who God is. Next, he reminds them of what he's done for them, what God had done for them. Look, he goes in detail about exactly what has God done for them, for his people, for Israel. Then he implores to this new generation to make sure that you follow these commandments. And that's something that we as parents or grandparents, I'm sure that we do. We want to pass on to the generation to obey God's commandment. And that's basically what Moses was trying to tell this new generation, obey God's commandment. Then he reminds them of the obligation to the covenant, under the covenant, and how important that covenant is with his people. God's covenant with his people, just like covenants with their parents as well that have died off. All right, the theme of this book is I mentioned several things already, but I guess one of the main themes, if I were to pull out one, is to remember God and keep the covenant with God. And I think that's one of the main themes in the book of what it's trying to do. You don't forget about God and keep his commandments is one of the main things. There are several things in the getting ahead of myself for just a moment. I'm reading from my PowerPoint and not my notes. Some key words in this book. The word covenant occurs about 27 times in the book, and again, that's in reference to the covenant that God has with his people, and he reminds them of that special relationship or that covenant with his people. Also, the name Yahweh occurs more than 220 times in this book as well. and I thought that was interesting as well. Another something else interesting is Christ seen in Deuteronomy. It's a statement made by Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 18 and 15. It gives a portrait of Christ. It said that the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your countrymen, you shall listen to him. So we have a clear portrait of Christ. This is Christ being talked about here in Deuteronomy. Moses is mentioning Christ. Okay, this is years, before Christ is come on the scene here. But we have a portrait in chapter 18, verse 15. Also, the note, Moses was a type of Christ in figure, in reference to the three offices of a prophet, offices of prophet, priest, and king. Although Moses was not a king, he functioned as ruler of Israel. So we have Moses as being a type of Christ example. The book contained 40 years of history, condensed in about 40 days of actual events that we read about here in the book. One of the Jesus talks about the greatest commandment, which we know is love. And oftentimes we think that God demands so much from us, so many things from us, maybe our money, our time, our effort, our will, our submission, and so forth. But what really God wants is our love. And that, I believe, was a very key point in the book, that God wants our love. He don't want our money and all this, but he wants us to love him. Okay, I mentioned that. Okay. There are several temptations that are mentioned in this book that I thought was very interesting. When Moses were trying to talk to the people, address the people, he mentioned several things in the book. The first thing that he wants us to remind them that they were chosen because the Lord has set his love upon them. And I think sometimes we forget that we are a chosen people. Christians are a chosen people. And that God loves his people and the church as well. And this group here, they must remember that their own prosperity and good health depends on their faithfulness to God. So their faithfulness and carrying out his instruction, as a result of that, their prosperity and good health, God will grant them prosperity and also good health. The next major temptation that Israel will face is the danger of becoming too self-reliant when they enter the promised land. I think that's even today. Sometimes when people become self-reliant, they get the attitude, well, I don't need God. I've done it all myself. Moses there trying to encourage them, look, it's a danger becoming too self-reliant and feel self-sufficient and begin to take credit in their own heart for all that God had done for them. And I think that we as Christians, we must be aware of that, that we may think that we got it all, or I take credit for what all this that happened in my life, all the things that God has given you. Well, I did all this, where I'm becoming puffed up and self-reliant, and that's what Moses was warning them against. The third one that he warned them about being spiritually prideful, thinking that they were better than everybody else. And sometimes people get the idea of, hey, I'm better than you. I'm becoming spiritual prideful. I'm this idea that I'm over you. Okay, I'm all that. I'm better than somebody else because of how spiritual I am. Moses warned them against that, of becoming that, and that and thinking that they're better than all the other nations that they will encounter, and God would take care of them. But remember that God can take away that pride in a drop of a hat, and God would deal with them if they begin to rise up in pride. The next one um, was the temptation for the nation of Israel was to overcome the same fear that their fathers had, the generation before them, uh, thinking that they become overcome with these issues. God was leading Israel into something too big for themselves. Uh, and there was no way Israel could do this in the flesh and on their own strength. God commanded them to do something that was beyond the ability to do themselves. The point of that is they needed God. They needed God in when they were crossing over this new land. Don't think that look, God is asking too much of us and we can't do it. Okay, and or we have the attitude we can do it ourselves without God. Okay, but how they got to where they are, and you're going to need God. God has done all this. He's the one giving the strength. You can't do this in your flesh on your own. You need God's help. And I think that we as Christians would take note of that too. In order to live the Christian life, you need God. You can't do it on your own. You're not, I can just do it on my own. I can go off and live whatever because I'm strong enough or I got it all together. I don't need God. And Moses was warning them against that as well. The last one was the temptation of becoming self-righteous. Uh, they can't. Moses warned them not to say to themselves, "It is because of our own righteousness that God had brought them in." But remember that Moses was reminding them, "Look, it's not your own righteousness. Don't think that, because remember that the people were a stubborn people. We were a stubborn people. We had a history." And Moses told them, we have a history of provoking God's wrath. So don't start to think that, it's because of our own righteousness. So Moses was kind of keeping them in check, so to speak, trying to remind them, look, it ain't about our righteousness because we had a history. And he goes on to tell them the history of the time that we provoked God to anger, to wrath. And these things happen and how we rebel against God. Now, one of the things that we don't want to miss in the message is what God requires of thee. One, to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways and to love him, to serve the Lord thy God with all the heart and with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command thee this day for good. Now, in chapters 12 to 25, I'm not going to go over this, but these are the laws arriving for the first commandment. Remember the 10 commandments on Mount Sinai? Well, these are laws that has arrived from each one of those commandments. So you can feel free to look at them yourself, but these are each one of the commandments. You got the first commandment, you have laws arriving from that commandment. Then you got the second commandment, then you got laws arriving from that one. So you have all the way up to chapter 25, so feel free to read that. Now, Moses finished the first 5 books of the Bible and gave them to Israel. Now, the question that comes up in Deuteronomy, well, who wrote the last chapters of the book? Probably Joshua. Probably wrote the last 3 chapters of Deuteronomy. Now, the 10 Commandments, which I thought was interesting, the 10 Commandments were placed, I knew it was placed inside the Ark of the Covenant, found in Hebrews 9 and 4, but the whole book of the law, Genesis to Deuteronomy, was placed beside the Ark of the Covenant. And I didn't know that. I've always assumed and believed and thought that the 10 Commandments were placed inside the Ark as well as the law. I knew the law was there, but I thought that it was placed inside the Ark of the Covenant. I didn't know that it was on the place beside the Ark of the Covenant, so I thought that was interesting as well. All right, the final chapter records the death of Moses. The Lord buried Moses, so no one knows where his grave is. You may remember the incident in Jude 9 when Michael, the archangel, was contending with the devil about the body of Moses. So there was a apparent little argument or contention about the body of Moses with the devil and also Michael, the archangel. We know the story. Michael won the argument, so to speak, and contended the authority. The Lord rebuke you. Final points in this chapter that may could help us is past mistakes may warn us, but only the giving over our hearts to love and obey the Lord can help us in our struggles. Our past mistakes, that we can learn from our past mistakes, and hopefully we do. But the key to living a successful Christian life is we have to give our hearts to God in love, to obey God, to keep his commandments, is the theme in this book of how we should live the Christian. Well, the theme in this book is how the people of Israel should live, but the apply today is how we to live as Christians. If we know him, if we love him, then we need to trust him and obey him. We cannot understand his way. When we cannot understand his ways, we still can trust the Lord. Simply put, through the whole book, God is first. And I think those would be sum up. To put it simply, God is first. And so that concludes my chapter study over the book. Before we close, we always want to extend the invitation to anyone who would like to obey the gospel. You have to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. You may have taken those steps. Please come now and stand and we sing the song that was selected.